So they came up with the Warner Brothers based on Tom's Boys. And he goes, but I'm not. I'm just reading it. Yes, yes, please do it that way.
Hey, cut it out.
Hello, I'm a puppy, Bud Leavenworth.
What's going on, folks? I am Scott Schertzen alongside Mr. Robert Buddy the Elf Manning, and joining us today on Streampunk Chats, Emmy Award winner and staple of our 1990s childhood. You remember shows like Animaniacs, Freakazoid, Hysteria, and now more recently, the voice in Puss in Boots, and also Puss in Boots on Netflix, and also Earth to Ned. We have Emmy Award winner, and like I said, a massive part of our 90s childhood, Mr. Paul Rugg. Sir?
Hello.
How the heck are you?
I apologize for everyone's 90s experience, and I hope it all worked out. Don't blame me if there were issues growing up. It wasn't my doing. So trust me.
To quote the chick, you're going sane in a crazy world. So no, thank you for that. But yeah, no, like I said, in this case here, the voice of Mr. Director from Animaniacs.
Hello!
Obviously the voice of Freakazoid himself, criminally underappreciated. Hysteria was also criminally underappreciated, I felt, in this case too. But we'll be talking a lot of Animaniacs. We'll be talking a lot of Freakazoid today.
Sure.
If there's anything else that you want to talk about, you want to plug, by all means, put us to work. Is what we're here for.
All right, fine.
But yeah, talk a little bit real quick, and I'll turn it over to him in a sec. The creation of Animaniacs. Obviously, this was during that era where Steven Spielberg was really trying to delve into animation a lot more. He had Tiny Toons. He already had a footprint in like the Fox animation aspect of it. Right. And then along comes something that's a little more outlandish than Tiny Toons was in our future, like I said, Animaniacs. Give me some thoughts, sir.
Well, so I think that what happened is that first of all, Warner Brothers really wanted to be in business with Steven, and so when Tiny Toons, I guess, was wrapping up, and this is before I came in right when they were just giving those first scripts for Animaniacs out. But before that, it was like, hey, I guess Tom Ruegger and Sherry Stoner and Steven and Gene McCurdy were like, anybody want to do something else maybe? So they were like, they knew they wanted, obviously it wouldn't be based on old Warner Brothers characters. I think they first pitched, believe it or not, the Plucky Duck Show, which was, and it was like, oh, I don't know. It was like, no, let's do something new. So they, Tom and Sherry and Peter Hastings and Deanna Oliver, they sort of said, well, let's just do something else. So they came up with the Warner Brothers based on Tom's Boys. And then they changed it to Dot. And they had all these other characters. So the Warners, Yakko and Wakko Dot would sort of be the anchor, and then all these other things. And Ruegger tells a very funny story about then they compiled all these maquettes, all these artists, and they met on a Sunday at Steven's house. And it was Sherry and Steven and Tom Ruegger. And it was like, okay, what do you guys got? And they showed the Warner Brothers and all that stuff. And then they finally came to Mindy and Buttons. Mm-hmm. And Steven, I guess, looked at it and he said, I'm not really feeling it. And one of Steven's kids came in and looked at Yakko, or looked at Minnie and Buttons and said, I like them. And Steven goes, they're back in the show. So that was basically it. And so it was like, it was going to have a Marx Brothers feel. The Yakko Wakko Dot were definitely based on the Marx Brothers. So then after they wrote the Bible, which is this, 500 pages of nonsense, when confronted with the trouble, the Warners will always go shavoo. And it's just stuff that doesn't really make sense. So they gave me that, and they gave John McCann that, and said, you're going to do Einstein, you're going to do Beethoven, and you're going to do Dracula or something. Wrote it, turned it in, and they said, welcome aboard, welcome to the show. So it was like, it was really Marx Brothers, Warner Brothers, getting back to the basics of Bugs and Daffy, a very irreverent comedy. And so that was so I don't know if I answered the question, but I surely went on for 5 minutes.
That's okay.
So that's good.
It's also, in this case, it also had a lot of hint of variety show to it, too.
Yeah.
Which kept it unpredictable. You had Pinky and the Brain. You mentioned Mindy and Buttons. I mean, Rita and Run. You had so many in there, and a couple of the other ones that, Katie Kaboom, which had a couple episodes, which
Right.
clearly was based on someone who had a teenage daughter who was, very like, yeah, there's material here.
Yeah. That definitely was based on someone's teenage daughter, and I'm sworn to secrecy. But
That's fair. Okay.
yeah. But yeah, so it was a lot of fun because all of the writers were sketch comics. Half of them came from the Groundlings. We came from the Acme Theater, which was an offshoot of the Groundlings, and it was very like, all right, here we go. You have 5 minutes to do outlandish things, and yours is going to be 6 minutes. So it was a lot of work. It was a lot of pressure, but at the same time, it was super, super fun to write.
Awesome. Rob, you had something?
I was going to say, one thing I know you from is Jake Long, the American Dragon.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
I remember growing up with that show, and they would always have that on at late night after, all the reruns and stuff. How was it being on that show?
It was fun. It was funny because, I'm not in the voiceover world. I'm the guy that does we can't figure this character out, give it to Rugg. But as far as like being a pro and being amazing like Jim Cummings or Maurice LaMarche, I am not in that league at all. So what I used to do in some of my auditions, if it said, and originally Jake Long, Professor Rotwood was a British, he's British. And I go, well, Frank Welk, Maurice LaMarche, they all do British. Like they can narrow it down to the county. I'll do this. And I'm like, I'm a dumb guy. So I did German. And I guess it was like, in the audition, when you get a billion auditions, everyone's doing, even as good as it is. And all of a sudden somebody's doing a really lousy German. It was like, hey, let's do that one. So I think they were like, I don't know. Yeah. So that's how I got that. It was fun, but we hardly ever on that show, because Disney's way was to, not record as a group. Normally it was you go in a room, and that was totally different from the way Warner Brothers worked, which was we're all in a room together. We're all like going, you're an idiot, and having a good time. And so that was really weird. It was, it's the director and the writer and the producer, and they're staring at you, and you're all alone. So that was my experience. I enjoyed it, but was it working with people and doing that stuff? It wasn't that great from that point of
right.
Yeah.
Which is now what voice actors have to deal with nowadays. Ever since COVID happened, I know one of the biggest complaints Jim Cummings talks about, how you guys don't get to record in the same room anymore at all, or there's a few, but not many.
Yeah, and it matters. I remember in Animaniacs, and like I said, I was just a writer. I didn't know anything about voiceover, but the writers would always come to the recording of their scripts. Sure. And Andrea would always have, everyone was together. It was very rare that we were missing a person. So it'd be the whole cast, the guest star or the guest, voice for that. And Andrea would do a rehearsal. Like she'd go, okay, guys, let's, and we'd all come in and it would go, okay, great. And she would like read, interior, camera fades in, and then everyone would just start doing it. And what was great about that was like, oh, is that what you thought? No. See, it's more like this. But it wasn't a lot of that, but it was like, everyone was like, oh, you're going to do that? Okay. So that means I'll do this. And it was this interesting thing. So finally, when it was like, okay, let's record one, it was pretty much, that was it. That was the recording, so, boy, there's something to be said for just taking that little amount of time, and you'll get all these interesting things. Like when Rob Paulson developed with Yakko that, I don't know, right? That he just did that once, and then we're like, oh, interesting. Okay, great. And everyone laughed, and it's this energy that I think is lost in the whole, hi, we're ready to zoom your voiceover now. And it's like, oh, okay.
Not just that, but Source. Sorry, I cut you off. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
But Source Connect being such a part of all this, not in that case, but also in the music industry as well. Because we had a guitarist on yesterday, and they did an entire album, across the pond. and they never met. And this is where, like you said, COVID is a big part of that, where it's all done remotely, so it loses a little bit of the magic.
Yeah.
When it comes to, like, say, for example, Batman the animated series. Now, I know I don't know how much you had to tie to that, but Andrea Romano had stories about, you'd see Kevin Conroy and Mark Hamill, and there's just this dynamic that they would have, and they would bounce off each other, and it was just the perfect chemistry, even with some of the other guest stars that came in there. David Warner, who was actually tied to both Freakazoid and also Batman animated series through Ra's al Ghul. But that kind of connection, I think, adds a lot to it. Because what people don't realize a lot with the voice industry is they don't realize that you have to build the set in your mind. Where it's all pre-recorded and then built, where people just assume you go in, you say some lines, you go home. No, it's a lot more than that, where you have to sit there and just basically use your mind's eye to figure out how this is going to look. And that's where I think the rehearsal part you mentioned is huge, because it helps everybody get in sync about what the vision is supposed to be. You'll do pickups later, but I think that's brilliant, honestly.
Yeah. And we made sure, a lot of times when someone would take the script for the recording session and just break down the lines, and it was like, oh no, don't do that, because you want to see all the direction, all the stuff that you'd written that built up to that line, or the parenthetical of how it's said. And I know Cartoon Network would simply just have the lines and then show you the storyboard. And I was like, man, I really love to read scripts. Show it to me on a script, please. I beg you. So anyway.
Yeah, well, it depends, I think, on the producers as well.
Right.
Because Disney and Marvel, they, I've stood in on projects. They give you that tiny bit of script and they take it back. DC is like, here, have the next script for the next 12 episodes. It's cool.
Right.
Right. Now, I will be asking you about Freakazoid in a second, but Rob, you got anything first?
I was gonna say, so what inspired you to be in this kind of business?
It was just doing sketch, improv. That was sort of that was my first love. And as most everyone knows, you can't live on sketch and improv. Do you know what I mean? You have to do a bunch of other things. And I think that's why when Animaniacs came around, for all of us, it was like, oh, so a skill that I have that I can use for the money that you'll pay and I'll take, and okay. So, that was it. I never imagined animation. That was like, but it was this, great. That it fit perfect. Animaniacs fit perfectly with that sort of thing. And then once I learned how to write, because on Warner Brothers, we used to have to write angles. It would be like angle on Yakko, camera pulls back to reveal dot. And so once I understood how to do that, and then use that as a form of comedy, like, oh, so you mean what I'm not showing the audience is as important as what I'm about to show them now. Do you know what I mean? It was like, oh, wow. So, and that's what I really credit Warner Brothers with, sort of like, you're in charge. It's your comedy. What they see as the writer, you'll put that down. And so, sometimes the board artists would be like, yeah, I have a better gag, and you'd look at it. But generally it was like, the way we wrote it is the way it all happened. So I don't know if I answered your question there, but
no, you did.
Okay. If you feel like answering with just talking about like the Bolshevik Revolution or what,
I can do that. I can do that.
Whatever answer is fine.
I have a lot of Tolstoy information. Yeah, I have a lot of Tolstoy. Yeah.
Well, I do want to talk Freakazoid in this case, because that's, that was the big bread and butter for me, because that was you guys, I think, more or less allowed to just cut loose and do what you want. Yeah. Now, I know when you and I talked about this, and I have to ask this outright, the weenie comment.
Yeah.
Now, did you write that just for the sole purpose of having Ricardo Montalban say the word weenie?
I am not a weenie. You are the weenie.
Probably. But Peter Hastings, who was more Pinky in the Brain and all that stuff, Peter, and he's gone on to direct Dogman and all kinds of stuff. Peter and I had a joke. I would always do silly words in my scripts, like chubby, fudgy, all that stuff. And then, but I also thought that because Freakazoid is very like, he's a kid and he would call someone a weenie. But then to pair that with Ricardo Montalban, saying, I am not the weenie, my friend. You are the weenie. So I guess it's a little bit of both, but I had Ricardo say some really dumb. He said chubby a lot. He said, yeah, I gave him purposefully silly, stupid dialogue. And he was, oh my gosh, he was fun. He was fun.
You
He
know,
he would come in. I remember when he first came in. I'm Mr. Writer, and I'm like, Ricardo, in this scene, this is all about you're going to be Khan and Wrath of Khan in this sequence,
mhm.
and I start talking. He goes, my friend, I understand the joke. I will do it, and I'm like, oh, of course, because you're a professional. I'll just go in the back.
Revenge is a dish best served with pinto beans and muffins. Kirk, old friend, Oh, sorry.
And he was amazing, and I think that's Andrea Romano again. She hired everybody. We didn't tell anybody nothing, David Warner is like, David, you're an idiot, a superhero. I understand. Right. You know what I mean? It's like everybody was just, Tim Curry was the same. Yeah. And that's what was so fun. And Ed Asner was like, so you don't want me to act at all? And we're like, not really. Just read it as Ed Asner. He goes, all right. Yeah. All right. And Freakazoid was the most fun I ever had.
Dude. And it's funny because you mentioned Tim Curry,
Yeah.
the Island of Dr. Mystico. I think you just gave him the right to cut loose,
Yeah.
They called me mad, insane, Wendell.
Yeah.
Wendell.
They called me mad, insane, Wendell. They barred me from the university. Well, who's crazy now? Who's mad now?
It was almost criminal. You only had one episode.
Yeah, no, well, that was this. I think with that script, I'm not sure where it is. 6. Yeah, I think that script 6. We already knew we were canceled.
Yeah, I know.
When we were writing those. So it was like, so wait a minute, no one really cares, and so we can just do anything now. And it was like, yeah. And so we would have loved to bring him back, but Tim Curry raised to this level that we didn't really see. We didn't know he was going to do all that, But everybody, I credit our recording sessions with. We used to record right next to Patty's on. I don't know what that road is there that used to be there, but it's in the middle of Toluca Lake. It was Patty's, and we had a recording session there. And right next to us on the other side was Baroni's Pizza. I don't even know if Baroni's Pizza exists anymore, but we would have Baroni's pizzas for Freakazoid's recording session. Everyone would come like an hour and a half early to sit and talk and have pizza. And, you'd have Ricardo Montalban, David Warner, Jonathan Harris, all sitting around a table, eating Baroni's pizza and going and just telling these incredible stories. And I think that's what, like, no one just came up and said, all right, what are my lines? What are my lines? They came, had some pizza, talk trash about other actors, which was always fun, especially Jonathan Harris. Jonathan Harris would come and go, oh my gosh, Owen Allen was a horrible man. And, and he would just go off on stories. And they used to just love to come and play. And then we would go record. And then it would go, okay, I'm going now. So, yeah.
Yeah, well, that's the other side of it, too. In this case, with the names you just mentioned, there's decades of knowledge there and experience and stories. And, when you're on a set like that, in any situation, and these people have been doing this for 20, 30 years, and just hearing them casually talk like for about Fantasy Island or Lou Grant, and just have, we had this one day when Mary Tyler Moore did this, and it was just very casual conversations, and you're sitting there kind of in a room like this and you're just absorbing it and stunned in a very surreal moment.
Oh yeah, no, there was a lot of surreal moments. Just sort of like being a fly on the wall. And unfortunately, I didn't get to record with them a lot because I was, one of the producers too. So we would do them. We would all do it for rehearsal. I would sort of do what I'm going to do, and then we would just do them for the recording. And I would sort of sit out and be, be like, well, maybe that line could be different or whatever. But I always wanted to mix it up with them, but I rarely got to.
Yeah, well, you got to, in this case here, it's you got to kind of know where you land.
Yeah,
and it's the same with the film industry too. If you are in a specific spot, you don't talk. Even if you're a first teamer day player, you can't even talk to the main cast a lot of times too.
Right. Yeah,
but
they were that. Yeah, but I mean, man, we had fun.
Nice. I do want to ask this. I'll turn it over to Rob in a second. I can't look at Norm Abrams the same way after that episode because that was the end of the 2-year era.
Right.
If there was a season 3, what did you guys have on tap? Were there any scripts that were, or at least ideas in mind, or anything like that?
We really didn't. The idea was to just keep doing that, especially in the second season. It was basically John McCann and I, who's really the reason Freakazoid is because John McCann wrote that pilot episode, that Dance of Doom, and sort of said, in lieu of anything else, here's a script, and we're like, wow, that's okay. I think you figured some weird stuff out. So, but we just knew that had we been given another season, we just done the same thing, just kept going. The second season was also different in that the network forced us to do half-hour episodes to make more sense, because they were like, the show doesn't make any sense. And so what we think is the answer here is for you to do half-hour episodes, and that way that's going to force you to do a story. And we were like, yeah, not really, but okay. Like, we didn't know. But we didn't know. It would probably have been more like Norm Abrams stories, because the kids, they love Norm Abrams. No one, we weren't writing it for anybody but ourselves, so we would have just kept going that way.
Nice. Rob, you got something, man?
All right, so I noticed your character Freakazoid actually came back in 2020.
Yeah.
An episode of Teen Titans Go.
Yeah.
How long have I been in that can? It's the year 2020. The future!
Yeah, so they were so nice to me. I guess the producer of that was like, they called me and said that they said, well, we're going to have a crossover and Steven's already approved it. And I'm like, awesome, great. And then they said something which was like unheard of. They go, can we send you a script and you can like Freakazoid it a bit? And I was like, yeah, like, of course. So I went through it but they were so like, they knew it so well that I only added a few things just because I was like, well, this might be fun. So that was really fun. And it was fun because they understood Freakazoid in a way that I think people at Warner Brothers before that, because they had talked to me before about maybe doing a reboot or whatever, and they, when they were talking about Freakazoid, I'm like, I don't think you guys have ever seen the show, because it was not the Freakazoid I remember. But when these guys came, it was like, oh man, okay, cool. So, and the only problem with that was I had just done about 5 months of doing Earth to Ned, 8 hours a day on the Henson lot, and so I was locked into the, hello, my name is Earth to Ned, and I was sort of focused on doing things of this nature, and I hadn't practiced Freakazoid. And it was like, when I got in there, I'm like, oh man, I forget, like, how does this guy work? And then I eventually found it, but that was really weird, like having not done Freakazoid for literally 25 years. But ultimately he's my voice, but still it was like, that was the only weird thing about that.
It wasn't like an H. John Benjamin voice work.
Yeah.
Now, I do, in this case here, like I said, when it comes to Freakazoid, and I mentioned this earlier, the episode The Cloud was based on a 1950s terrible, horror movie called The Crawling Eye, about this eye that would just, walk around the cloud and kill people.
Right.
The ability to take something so curious, quirky, and nuanced and turn it into an episode, did you guys get some ideas where you're just sitting there channel surfing and thinking, okay, there's something?
No. So, basically, our biggest thing was whatever we thought was cool and funny, that's what we were going to do. And when Steven Spielberg, who is also a fan of The Crawling Eye, is a huge fan of The Crawling Eye, it's like, well, he's going to think this is fine. So it was like, it was this perfect thing where, whether rightly or wrongly, because nobody knows what The Crawling Eye was, but Steven knew, and we had talked about it at a meeting at Amblin. We were going through all this stuff about movies and stuff, and we talked about The Crawling Eye, and we just thought, oh man. So I went back and was like, well, I would love to do a parody of The Crawling Eye. Not even knowing, wait a minute, people might even not even care, might not even know. And then we were so stupid that we're like, not only we're going to do The Crawling Eye, we're going to do a shot-for-shot parody of the opening. Which again, who cares? But we cared. It mattered. It mattered to us. And I think we even ripped off that opening sequence down to the titles where the arrows come in. And but that was a reason to like wake up in the morning and go to work. It was like, I'm doing a parody of The Crawling Eye today, damn it. Nobody's gonna stop me.
Yeah.
And that having now worked at many other places, that's just doesn't exist, doesn't exist of saying, I'm going to write this thing. Oh, it's finished. I just wrote this thing. And then I literally hand it off to Andrea and said, here you go. No one read it. No one. I mean, it would go to Steven, but Steven was busy making, I think it was in pre-production on Saving Private Ryan. Just finished Schindler's List. But we always knew because of what had happened in the past, he would read something and go, that was funny. And we'd go, okay, I guess we're going to make that. So by that time, it was like you hand it off to Andrea, and in a week and a half, we're making it. Like there weren't, Betty down in accounting and Phil in standards and practices and Dorothy, the second assistant, weren't all given notes. It was like, John, I just finished my script. Great. What? Okay, great. And we made a show. So that clearly doesn't happen anymore.
It's almost like an independent project.
Yeah. And Steven, God bless him, he gave us cover, and he also really liked the show. That when we won the Emmy for Freakazoid, and he was about to leave to go start shooting Saving Private Ryan, he showed up at the office to get his Emmy, and we had also won for Animaniacs that year, so we had 2 Emmys. And he came into the office and he's like, where's my Freakazoid Emmy? And we go, it's there. And we go, Steven, but you also won for Animaniacs. He goes, yeah, but Freakazoid, we won for Freakazoid. And I was like, oh, that's cool. And Steven was like, he's one of those people where when you look at him, you go, man, you were born to do exactly what it is you do. And there's like no other thing that you should ever do. And he was just that guy. And he was always so nice to us and never played the I'm Steven Spielberg kind of thing. He was generally remembered our names, which trust me, I've worked for other people that are sort of quite at that level, and they're not like him. They're not pleasant, and so he was just having a good time.
Nice. Yeah, and this when it comes to stuff like like I said with Freakazoid, you guys. What you made was so quotable, and this is actually where I was going to go with this. When my wife and I were in France last year, she knows basically very little French except for one phrase.
Qui a coupé le fromage? Who cut the cheese? Yes. Yeah.
One more time, just so I can have a soundbite for that.
Qui a coupé le fromage?
Perfect. Très bien, monsieur.
Yeah. Yeah, that was Tom Ruger. When we got handed Freakazoid, which was, I think, December of '94, it was like, we're on in like less than a year. What do we do? So Tom spent an entire Christmas break writing stuff, like all this weird stuff, this little bit and that little bit and that little bit and weird stuff. And he came back from Christmas break and he's like, I think we've got some weird Freakazoid stuff here. And John and I are reading it going, what's Frenching with Freakazoid? What is that? What is all this weirdness? And he sent it to Steven, and Steven's like, that's a lot of weirdness. I like it, but could we have a little bit of a story? So we took all those little bits we interspersed throughout the show. But that's all from Tom's mind. And I'm like, okay, I guess we'll do that one. So that was, yeah.
Glorious. Love it. Rob?
That's great. Out of all the people that you've worked with, do you got anybody that just brings up like a funny story or anything like that?
You mean in the writing or the voiceover or
Voice acting world.
well, David David Warner was so cool, and Jonathan Harris were probably two of my, and Ed. So all of those guys. But Jonathan was funny because Jonathan Harris, who, if you're my age and you grew up in the late '60s, Lost in Space was like, I mean, come on, it was
Never
Lost in
mind.
Space. And so when John and I were going to do the second season, we're like, you know, it'd be funny to give Freakazoid this manservant who's an absolute idiot. And John and I both go, what about Jonathan Harris?
Weren't you on a TV show with a robot?
Never mind.
And, oh, wouldn't that be great? Wouldn't it be amazing? We'll never get Jonathan Harris because we were idiots. So we wrote this letter, you know, and we gave it to Andrea Romano. Please try to get us. And it was, dear Mr. Harris, for years and generations, lost in blah 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 blah. And we wrote this long letter, gave it to Andrea, and she goes, "What's this for?" And I go, "Well, we'd really love to get Jonathan Harris." She goes, "Just, are you going to pay him? Then he'll come." Meaning it was like, you know, Jonathan Harris will show up. He'll show up at a post office opening if you pay him. So we're like, oh, we didn't know that. And so he came, and Jonathan would do Dr. Smith. He did Dr. Smith for us, and we loved it. And then he started to be like, he would call John and I on a Thursday or something after we record, and he goes, what are you and Johnny doing? Do you want to go to lunch? And we go, yeah, Jonathan, we'll go to lunch. And we would go to lunch with him at a place called Mistral, which is in Encino on Sherman, and I don't even know it's still there. And Jonathan would hold court, taking us under his wing about, I'm the experienced man, and I will tell you all about the industry. And he would just sit back and tell Irwin Allen stories about what a jerk he was and about Tallulah Bankhead and all these crazy things. And then he would show up to recordings again, and he had such a good time. And when we won the Emmy, he sent us this letter, and he used the F word quite a bit, which was just stunningly amazing. Jonathan had a mouth like a sailor, and it was everything. It was expletive city. But he was so gracious, and you won. Do you know why you won? Because you are creative people, and screw the networks, screw them all. You know, it's just like, he was amazing. He was so fun, and so that's Jonathan. Jonathan would just loved being a part of this weird new thing, and he was flying back and forth to do what was the Pixar ant movie, Bug's Life.
Bugs Life, yeah.
So he was flying back and telling us all about John Lasseter, but he was amazing. And then David Warner, I really I got to know him because he was filming Titanic when he was doing the load.
Yes.
So they were filming at a dunk tank, I think, or a big tank in Long Beach, or wherever it was. But he had it built into his contract that he could drive to do Freakazoid. And then he would go back. So I can just imagine James Cameron being like, all right, dunk him in again. It's like, I'm sorry, I have to go to Freakazoid. And it's like, all right, fine. But he would, he would just show up. I remember he drove this like cruddy Volvo. And I was younger then. And I was like, why would such a famous man drive a cruddy Volvo? But anyway, but he was great.
Nice.
Did he ever get to read the actual letter that you wrote?
That Jonathan wrote?
Yeah. The letter that you wrote to Jonathan to try to get
no. Andrea Romano probably still has it. But Andrea was so great because she would suggest such fun ideas. Like, who I can get for this? I can get for this. And I'd be like, okay, Andrea, who can you get for this? And she gave Craig Ferguson his first, I think, I could be wrong. I think Craig Ferguson's first job in America was on Freakazoid as Roddy
McSteer.
Yeah.
Brick.
And I remember she brought him in because I originally wanted it to be Mike Myers for whatever reason, the Scottish guy. And I remember Andrea going, okay, that's a bridge too far. Like, that's not going to happen. I'm like, okay. So she put out the call for like a Scottish, and so she brought him in, and we all met him, and and we're like, yeah, fine. He seems to be Scottish, so what else do we need to know? So yeah.
Strength and speed will only take you so far, lad.
It got me a second season.
You can't count on that! Networks are fickle! They can drop you like a man with big oak fingers!
And he was tied to Drew Carey show around that time, wasn't he?
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
Right after, yeah.
So that's awesome. We'll give it a couple more minutes. Yeah, go ahead.
I was gonna say, speaking, we've mentioned Ed Asner, and obviously me being Buddy, and he was Santa Claus.
Yeah.
How was Mr. Ed Asner? I never had the chance to actually get to meet him.
He was fun. I mean, Ed, the way Ed Asner it was going to be a one-off. Like I said, John McCann wrote the pilot, The Dance of Doom. Put Cosgrove in there. Andrea Romano said, I think I can get him to do that. And we thought, oh, that will be funny. And as Ed was sitting in there right before rehearsal and we were doing mic checks and stuff, he was just sort of looking at the lines going, hey, Freakazoid, I want to go get a mint. Like reading it, not doing whatever. And we were all like, oh, do that. And he goes, but I'm just reading it. Yes, please do it that way.
Hey, cut it out.
So he would just come in going, I just get to be Ed Asner reading Ed Asner. And he was fun. He had a great time. He started really, he got it from the beginning, but when the Freakazoid Cosgrove dynamic started, their friendship, we started writing to that right away. And he was just, I think my favorite Ed line was when he asks Craig Ferguson, hey, what do they call poo gas in Scotland? And he goes, oh, they call that duty water or crud vapors.
Crud vapor.
and Ed Asner goes, ha, crud vapors. I like that. And it was just this stupid, Ed was great. Ed was great. Ed showed up, they were all awesome.
And that was pre-Up too.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
I gotta ask, this is totally out of left field. I just gotta get this. I'm not gonna get another opportunity like this.
Yeah.
Pinky, Elmyra, and the Brain.
Yeah.
You got anything on this? Because I think it was one of those things where, I don't think you were tied to it. But
No. But, thank goodness.
I was going to say, the writers were just like, we don't care, just do it.
Well, no. It's not the writers at all. There was a sea change, a big sea change at Warner Brothers, where, I think had things continued on and the WB sort of trusted Warner's Animation to do what they did. But then they started really reaching in and saying, we have a better idea. So that came from, the WB. Like we have an idea and it's going to be great. And I had left by that point because after Freakazoid, I pitched the Daffy Duck primetime show, which was sort of like the Jack Benny show. And they were like, we don't want to do this. And I was like, okay. And I was like, I don't want to play anymore. So, but a lot of people were like, well, I'll stay and play. And Pinky and Elmyra and the Brain happened. And it was just a bunch of this being sort of like, this is what you're going to do now, Lunatics or Tunatics, whatever that was. That's another example of here's what the network wants. So rather than Warner Brothers saying, hey, this is what our creative ideas are to branch out, it came from the other way. We're looking for a show that'll appeal to children 7 to 10, and 7 to 10, and it's going to have this sort of thing, and it was like, and that's why I think everything broke down. It wasn't creator driven anymore. It was, this is what the network's buying. This is exactly what they want, rather than here's what we have to offer. So yeah, but it's not the writer's fault. Definitely, it's not the animator's fault. It's this is what the requirements were.
Yeah, let me clarify that, because even in the opening song,
Yeah.
You know, it's like it's what the network wants. Why bother to complain?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And
you're getting a check out of it. Just deal with it.
Yeah, and John McCann, who's like, again, whose praises I've sung in Freakazoid. I think he made the best out of that show. Given what he was given, it's like, well, what do we do? So yeah, I think like 95, 90. So yeah, Warner Brothers in the mid 90s, under Gene McCurdy, was a very protected bubble of creativity, and then I think that other forces sort of chipped away at that. They breached the gates, and it was like, run for the hills, everybody! It's over. I hope you all had a good time because it's not going to be that way anymore. So yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, I think also at that point towards the end, anime was starting to take over on Saturday mornings a little bit too. So it became a lot of, between Pokemon, I think Digimon, things like this where they saw a new genre appear.
Right. Yeah. And Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, which I think we parodied on Animaniacs. We called it Super Strong Warner Siblings. That was really fun. But yeah, and also those shows are cheap. Yep. And Freakazoid and other shows were very expensive. We had full orchestra. We spent a ton of money. And ultimately it became a business decision. It was like, well, wait a minute. That show cost us $4 to buy. And you guys just spent $700,000 on a Hello Dolly music number.
Yes, Lobie.
Oh, bonjour. Gosh, bonjour. Lobie. Lobie's back and feeling higher than a kite.
I think we'll go over there where it's cheaper. So, yeah.
But we are grateful for all of it. I'll let you go in a minute in this case. Rob, do you have anything? And then I want to basically find out what you have upcoming, in the future, how people can get in contact with you, things like that. But Rob, do you have anything left?
Yeah, I was going to say, how did it come back? How did it feel to come back into when they did the reboot of the Animaniacs, that spinoff? I see you voiced one of the characters. How did it feel to come back after all these years later?
I was all by myself in a room, and they were like, you can do this character again, nice and chubby baby, or whatever it was, Mr. Director. But it was kind of bittersweet because I think they made a ton of mistakes on that show. That's my opinion.
Yes.
They sort of took the Warners, who are a collective Bugs Bunny, winners. They always win, and they're always acting upon the foil, the Margaret Dumont to the Marx Brothers. And that's the way it has to always be. But the reboot sort of turned them to these three characters who are acted upon, and oh no, what do we do now? It's like, no. They know what they're going to do because they know they're in a show. This is all a game. And I think that's where they maybe missed the mark, to keep that sort of like, guys, no, this is all about, let's find our mark, and that's who we're going against. And it's all done tongue in cheek, and none of this is real, and it's all a joke. And so coming in after having seen some of those, I'm like, oh, I don't like what you guys are doing, but okay, I'll do it. You know what I mean? Yep. But they didn't really,
in a lot of ways, yeah.
Yeah, they didn't really, they didn't let Tom Ruegger come play. Or if they did, it was like, you can write a script. But, and I had a couple meetings with them, and I was sort of like, man, this vibe is, I have to garden. I have a weed whacker, and there's stuff that needs to be done.
It's kind of a shame, really, but...
Yeah, it was just like, it wasn't, I didn't,
Yeah.
Say as much as you're allowed, basically, without getting in trouble here.
Yeah, great people worked on it, really great. Yes. But I think that the idea, why they just didn't do the show is beyond me. And the other thing too is, I'll say, is that having those little interstitials, those minion buttons, whatever, having those allowed the show to rest from the anarchy of Yakko Wakko Dot, right? So it made you want Yakko Wakko Dot because and not that those other pieces weren't good, but it was a different vibe. It was a let's all calm down a little bit. The energy will be different, and then we'll come back to the Warners again. So it was a rest, pause, go principle, where I think when it just was all, Yakko and Dot all the time, it's hard to keep that energy up. So you need those little pauses.
And I think also with the original series, there was an unpredictability.
Yeah.
So when an episode was over, you didn't know which group, we'll call it, was coming next there, and it added this level of intrigue and excitement of, okay, who's the next cast members we're going to see and what are they going to get into?
Right.
Because
Also, I'll just say we didn't have a writer's room on Animaniacs. We were, we'd go into Tom's office and he'd say, "You're doing that one." And we go, "Oh, all right." He'd go, "You have a week, bye." And we'd all go in the hallway and we'd all talk. But there was never like, "Here's the script, everyone. Okay, what are we going to do with this?" And, because I believe what that does sometimes is it waters down one unique vision into something that becomes this organic whole that necessarily is we all agree is fine, but wasn't as specific as here's Peter Hastings' Animaniacs, here's Deanna's Animaniacs, here's Paul's Animaniacs, here's John McCann. This different flavory thing that we all did. So I think I think they fell into a trap, and that's all I'll say about that.
It's a trap.
That's all I have to say about that.
Yeah. That's all I'll say about
that. That's all.
That's right.
There you go.
That's right. Yeah.
So,
but I do have one last quick question before we go. I'd like to know, what is your favorite color?
Green.
Nice. And basically, my last question here is, what do you have on tap, if anything? How can people get in contact with you and anything like that?
Basically, I am retiring in about 4 months.
Nice.
And I play with my grandchild a lot, and but yeah, I from time to time I'll post stupid videos on YouTube, but I'm sort of out of the industry. Which I think I've chosen a very good time to sort of could slowly back away.
I've been recovering since 2023.
Yeah, and so I'm just sort of I'll audition for whatever, but also the industry's changed so much, and so I moved away from California to be closer to my daughter and her husband and their grandchild. So now I live on the side of the mountain. There are deer outside. There are fawn, and it's just your mind sort of changes and wanders, and it was like, well, that was fun when we did that, isn't it? But now I have to go water the lawn, and so.
But you know what? Congratulations for it. It's a retirement well earned 1,000 times over.
Thank you.
Because the impact that you had on all of us, with everything. I mean, even the educational part. I mean, nations of the world, is obviously well known, but states and capitals. Jess Hartnell should get a lot more credit than he gets for nailing that to Baton Rouge, Louisiana, Indianapolis, and and it's just basically that kind of stuff that added this. You don't want to learn, but you do anyway. And that's where, like I said, this is where such a charm came from it, where it was an educational absurdity.
Right. Yeah.
And that's, like I said, Animaniacs was such a huge part of that. Freakazoid obviously was less educational, but a little more obviously, chaotic.
Well, you did learn how to say "who cut the cheese" in French. So
we did. Yes.
Don't say that we weren't totally educational.
And also learned conversational Norwegian in the process.
There you go. See, so there was education there.
There is. So, but how can people get in touch with you? Social media wise, not no
just,
phone number, no phone number, mailing address.
No, you can.
We need your social security number.
You can search for me on Twitter X or whatever they're calling it today, and on YouTube it's Freundleben. There's a thing, you can see it, and there's a thing, and sometimes every 3 full moons I'll post a weird thing that a few people will see, but generally that's it.
And kids have no idea who Jerry Lewis is.
They don't. which should be corrected, but I
Yeah.
think there's But the French kids in France, they
Sure.
know. So there you go.
Right.
Yeah.
But yes, you mentioned Beethoven earlier, world-class composer and
Right.
pianist.
Right, and pianist.
And pianist.
I am Ludwig von Beethoven, world famous composer and pianist.
Good night, everybody.
Good night, everybody. Go ahead, Rob. Sorry.
Do you have any convention? Do you do any of the conventions?
I do from time to time. But Tom Ruger and I will sometimes go, and Steve and Julie Bernstein, who are the composers for Animaniacs and stuff, will sometimes go. Those are very rare that we go. Although Ruger, Tom Ruger, I think he's about to show up at Phoenix Fan Fusion.
Oh yeah, Phoenix Fan Fusion.
Yeah.
Yes.
I go from time to time, and people kind of walk by and go, who are you? And I'm like, hey, I'm like Freakazoid. What is that? So it's like, but it's fine. It's fine.
But like I said, for the Gen X and Gen Y, like I said, massive staple.
Right.
So
Right.
1,000 times over. Appreciate it.
There's before you go, there's I don't know if you got if for those of you that want to be Jerry Lewis fans, go watch something called The Errand Boy, which is it's where he is a like a gopher at Paramount Studios, and it's brilliant. But it's one of those things where he comes across a guy named Mr. Watnopley, and Jerry goes, Mr. Hobnobble? He goes, no, Mr. Watnopley. Baba's Hobnobble? No, it's very easy. What? 10 Knobbly. Anyway, there you go. So watch that, and you'll know.
Now, see, I was raised on Nutty Professor, the original, not the Eddie Murphy one.
Yeah.
But
Mr. Watnopley, I'll always remember that. The Errand Boy, watch it. Okay.
Yes, sir. So, all right. Once again, one more time, Emmy Award winner for Animaniacs, Freakazoid. Like I said, a staple of our 90s childhood, Mr. Paul Rugg. This has been Streampunk Entertainment, Streampunk Chats, chatting with awesome people. Take care as always. Like, comment, and subscribe. You know that drill. And take care. Until next time, stay awesome.